Welcome back to Switch to Linux. Well, today I wanted to talk a little bit about the Linus Tech Tips Linux Challenge. A few people have asked me to respond to this video, and I don't want to do a standard reaction video, as it were. But what I do want to do is I want to talk about some of the things that I just want to point out a few of the things that they did right, a few of the things that they did wrong, and just kind of point out that I almost feel like this is hard to say, because on the one hand, I stopped watching Linus Tech Tips because it was like a video version of all of the tech journalist sites. It's every new tech that comes out. It's blowing smoke up everybody's butt about why you should always buy it, and here's the affiliate link and stuff like that. And so there was never a real, honest, heart-to-heart critique of any individual product. It was basically like, hey, here's a new product, buy it and use our link. And I kind of got sick of that type of stuff. And they just always seem like corporate shills to me in that respect. Now, that being said, they are an excellent resource to go to on a lot of different topics. So they do know, I mean, talk about hardware. I know nothing about hardware compared to these guys. I am a noob on all that kind of stuff. You ask me what type of graphics card put in your computer, I don't know. I don't really care, really. I mean, don't use NVIDIA if you plan on running Linux. There's a thought. But so just to preface, I deeply respect the guys at Linus Tech Tips, but I also see them more as corporate shills and just a video arm of marketing the latest tech gadgets rather than doing any honest-to-honest critique. But maybe I just haven't watched enough of their stuff either. That's just kind of my initial thoughts. Now, that being said, when we get into the Linux video, they have done a few things right. They've done a few things wrong, and it begs a few interesting questions. So what I want to do here is let's go ahead and have a brief look at just a few clips from their video, and I want to comment about some of the positives and some of the negatives. So here's the first part. This is just the very beginning of the video, and I will link the whole video down below.
To celebrate the exciting launch of Windows 11, Luke and I are challenging each other to ditch Windows altogether and replace our Windows PCs with Linux for a month.
Okay, so we're just going to ditch our entire PC for a whole month and do nothing but switch over. Bad plan. Most people who do that don't stay with Linux. You have a bad experience with Linux, you say, oh, that just sucks, and you're going back to your operating system. So the entire idea of saying, I'm going to dump everything and just go ahead and use Linux without any preparation, without any planning, without any extra forethought, you're going to have a bad experience. You don't want to do that. So as I has always recommended, you want to try Linux with, if you can get an alternative computer, you pick up something on eBay for a few dollars, and install Linux onto that. And use this and build into your experience. Get it working, but never sacrifice your real machine. Now, if you don't have the funds or availability to do that, you can use just any given external hard drive or just a USB port, and you can install Linux onto that and use that on your primary computer, having your main computer staying your old operating system, be it Windows or Mac, and your new computer being Linux. And then what you want to do is, instead of just dumping everything and jumping in, you want to start slowly learning how to merge your software over to FOSS software instead. So if you're Microsoft Office guy and an Adobe suite user, you're going to want to install Linux and install one of the free Office suites like LibreOffice or OnlyOffice or a variety of any other open source free Office suite, which, by the way, are also going to be compatible with your Mac and with your Windows computer. So that's really the best first place to start. Say, I need to do Office work. Don't sit there and say, I need to use Microsoft Word. Get out of that mindset. Get off of that mindset and move off of the idea that you just need to use Microsoft Office. No, you need to do Office documents. And you can do Office documents just fine with LibreOffice, with OnlyOffice, and a variety of other open source Office suites that are available. So you start installing those on your main system and then learn that workflow. And then when most of your applications, if not all of your applications, have been merged to FOSS software, your switch to Linux is going to be completely seamless. So the very first starting presupposition they're going to do is to say, let's go ahead and just dump. Let's just dump Windows and just go with Linux for a month without any pre-preparation. That is a bad plan. And that is why I think there's that's why this video leaves a negative impression for some people. Clearly the Linux guys are going to watch this, go, oh crap, you're doing it all wrong. You're making a bad name. And purely the Windows guys are going to be going, yeah, this is why I don't use Linux, because Linux sucks. And that's kind of the problem. So they didn't even do this right. Don't do it like this. Don't just jump ship. So let's go ahead and see what else we have in here. So the next thing that he gets into is equal parts valid criticism and I want to say logical fallacy. So let's have a brief look at what his next clip happens to be.
Embarrassingly, I have never actually made an earnest attempt to daily drive Linux. And one of the reasons for that is the utterly paralyzing number of choices you have to make before you even get started. Now, I could just call on industry contacts or even use internal resources to make these decisions for me. But the point of this challenge is that Luke and I should be using the exact same resources that anyone else would have. And with that in mind, right out of...
All right, so let's break these things down. Number one, yes, there are a lot of choices in Linux, but it really only boils down to a few. While there are thousands of distributions, if you start researching the best Linux distributions, it's always going to boil down to a list of a top 5. You're going to have about 3 of those distributions are going to overlap. Use one of those. Use one of those. And I want... in a part of me says the Linux distribution doesn't matter, but in a part of you, the Linux distribution does matter. So there is a little bit of overlap. There is some time to say, yes, indeed, Linux distributions do count, but Linux distributions do not necessarily have to count all the time. And so there certainly is a little bit of back and forth here. Now, he talks about, let's call on industry contacts or internal resources, but we don't have those. So let's do what? Go to Google? Why are you sending people to Google in 2021? This is a bad option. Use Startpage, DuckDuckGo, Brave Search. Use Yahoo before Google. I mean, really. But at the same time, what does he do? He types into Google best Linux distro for gaming. Okay, gaming. The one thing Linux doesn't do quite as well as other things, and that's the entire basis. So Linus Tech Tip's entire world of his computer must circle around gaming. I gotta say, as much fellowship as you can get in playing video games, that is sad if you have to boil it down to a Google search on the best Linux distribution for gaming. Now, this is the reason I bring up the logical fallacy portion, is that people do have more resources than just going onto Google. There are hundreds of very good Linux channels out there. Rather than relying on a Google for a generic best Linux distro for gaming search, or talking to Wendell at Level 1 Techs, who most of us don't have access to, or your internal resource Linux Geek, who also we don't necessarily have access to, what do? Well, why don't you go to YouTube instead of Google and watch one of the several Linux channels like this one and several other ones like Linux Experiment and oh man, there's just so many that we couldn't even list those all out. Pizza Loving Nerd, although he does more phone stuff these days, I think. But his Linux stuff is also very good. There's just so many good channels out there that you can look at, rather than what he ends up doing is he ends up finding 2 articles. One from, I got to find the spot there. Oh, I just had it. He finds one from Tech Radar, and he finds one from Tom's hardware guide. And so that's really his option, is to look at these 2 articles here. So Tom's guide and Tech Radar. So let's go ahead and pull up those 2 articles and see what they have to tell us. All right, so these are the two articles that he references, and I have not pulled them up prior to this, so we're going to look at these in real time. So here is the Tom's Guide, and here is the Tech Radar. So as I said, there's going to be some overlap. So before we dive into anything, let's see what we have. We have Draugr OS, we have a Ubuntu Game Pack, and these are gaming things. There's Fedora, we have Pop OS, we have Leica. All right, so then Tom's Guide gives us Pop OS, Manjaro, Draugr OS, Garuda, Ubuntu. Okay, so as I said, there's going to be some overlap. Ubuntu, Pop OS, and Draugr OS appear in all these. I've never used Draugr OS. Maybe I'll go ahead and do a look at that, see how that guy happens to look. But of course, that's based on Ubuntu. Manjaro is over here. Now, Pop OS shows up on both lists, so that is a decent distribution. Now, this is the part where there was a weird Pop OS bug that Linus comes across that is definitely not a normal part of Linux. We will get into that one in a bit. But let's go ahead and have a look at what these guys have to say. So in the Tom's Guide, and again, these are both articles specific to gaming. And so they're just, their basic information here. Pop OS, reasons, now it says reasons to buy, reasons to use it, NVIDIA and AMD ISOs. Now, this is the thing he says, well, I better use this one because that is an ISO specific for NVIDIA. I got news for you. Most Linux distributions now, particularly those based on Ubuntu, are going to be able to install your NVIDIA drivers out of the box. In fact, Linux Mint has the option right in the install menu to boot it up and install for NVIDIA instead of AMD. Just the thing. Okay, it says simple to use. I disagree. I think Pop OS, which is based on GNOME, is the hard operating system to use. It's not as intuitive as other desktop options. It has Steam and Lutris easily accessible. That is part of the weird problem that we have. Excellent tweaks and reasons to avoid it. Bare bones out of the box. Maybe, I don't know. Manjaro, powerful Arch-based, stable but bleeding edge. Manjaro hardware detection is excellent for driver management, strong community, tons of DE options. And this is one of the negatives that Linus talks about in his video, saying that I don't even know what this means. Yeah, if you watch some YouTube videos on Linux channels, or, I say YouTube, but I'm talking about going to McDonald's, meaning fast food, okay? Getting a Pepsi for any generic soda. Going to YouTube, going to library, going to BitChute, going to, wherever your Rumble, wherever you're getting your video content, you would know what these options are. If you don't know what DE options are before wiping out your entire Windows computer and installing Linux, I'm sorry, you're not doing it right. You need to know what these terms are before you decide to commit to any of them. Reasons to avoid: can run into issues sometimes. Any Linux distribution can run into issues sometime. I'm not sure why that's a negative. One of the other positives, though, is that Arch, which Manjaro is based on, Arch is leading the edge in gaming development because they are working in lockstep with Valve to make sure everything on the Steam library is compatible. Draugr OS, reasons by enhanced stability, security, built ground up for gaming-focused kernel modifications to avoid cumbersome, buggy installer and bare bones alive environment. Okay, maybe I'll look into that one. Garuda, also based on Arch, powerful customizations, easy-to-use installer, snapshots accessible in Grub, many gaming packages easily installed and can be unstable. I think they just write that. I think they're still operating under this old idea that Arch can be unstable. I've not had problems running Arch, honestly. Ubuntu, easy to use and stable, beginner friendly, versatile, plenty of support, huge community, getting set up for gaming can be a hassle. Okay, so those are the things that he's talking about. Over here on Tech Radar, we have Draugr OS, multiple gaming platforms, supports several controllers, no browser and live environment, cumbersome system installer. I want to play around with that cumbersome system installer. Game Pack supports multiple gaming platforms, includes game mode optimizations, tons of regular desktop apps, no pre-installed games. This is another one that he mentions is a negative. Really? Does anybody sit around and play any of the pre-installed games on any Linux distribution other than the occasional game of solitaire? Really? I go through and uninstall that crap, but, as I said, I'm not a gamer. Fedora game spins, hundreds of games, fully usable live environment, open source titles. And Pop OS supports hybrid graphics, huge separate image for NVIDIA users. Again, you don't have to have a separate image for NVIDIA. You just have to have the ability to install it, and most of them have the option right on the install menu, like Linux Mint. Bare bones out of the box. And Laka, have not heard of this one either. Emulates, I think this is an emulator, I think, more than anything. Emulates dozens of consoles available for multiple platforms, doesn't include any games. People who seem to include those games tend to have millions of dollars in fines. Just say. All right, let's see what else he says next. So next we go to Luke, and Luke is using Linux Mint. Now, one of the things I could not find here is what is the option that he chose in the installer. Because as I said, when you boot Linux Mint, it gives you the option to install for AMD or to install for NVIDIA. He doesn't tell us which one he's using. Now, he does run into one issue in the live environment, so let's have a look at what that is.
Okay, so this is what happened last time. My desktop you can see where it's supposed to sort of end, but it keeps going on the.
Okay, so he's having an issue with Linux Mint rendering the desktop properly. I have never seen this. However, Chris Titus Tech does say that he has seen this as well. I'm wondering if this is whatever type of monitor. If Luke is using a super high res, a 4K, some monitor like that, that might actually be occurring. I don't use those monitors, which explains why I have not seen that. Now, as you go through his installer, everything he has seems to be working just fine, including installing the NVIDIA drivers and things like that. So that's really what's going on his. And overall, he actually has a very good experience with his install process. But that's him. Linus has a little bit different option. All right, so Linus has a few issues in that he's using a lot of really super proprietary hardware, and some of it does work and some of it is not working. And so this is one of the things he should have researched a little bit better. That being said, that's just kind of a minor issue. Next, he has a major issue, which is it's equal parts him and it's equal parts what in the world did Pop! OS just do? So let's have a look at that part here. And this is the one that has produced all of the various memes about Pop! OS lately.
I will definitely need Steam. Failed to install Steam. Warning, you are trying to remove the following essential packages. What are you talking about? I've done nothing with this other than install that hard info thing. You know what's hilarious? The last time I tried to do anything on Ubuntu,
so
I ran
he's trying
into
to
this
install
exact
Steam.
Same thing.
It's not installing. It says it's trying to remove important packages. That's what's going on. Now,
you do not.
This is an issue I've never seen, but apparently it's something new.
This is the solution.
So here he goes into this.
Yes,
and pay attention to
I say in order to install it. And
okay, so what he just did is he says, okay, well, let's leave behind the package manager. Let's go into the terminal. Let's sudo apt install Steam. And then what happened is, let me back this up just a brief second here. What happens here is when he goes and does it, it gives us a warning. Warning, the following essential packages will be removed. This should not be done unless you know exactly what you are doing. And then it lists a series of things. Pop Desktop, Pop Session, GNOME Control Center, basically his entire desktop environment. It says, after this operation, 195 disk space will be freed. You are about to do something potentially harmful. To continue, type the phrase, yes, do as I say. So he types, yes, do as I say, and then is surprised that his entire computer collapses. Are you kidding me? Yes, this is a major bug with GNOME. Or it was Pop! OS. It was either Pop! OS or GNOME. One of those two. I haven't researched what this bug is all about. But if it fails to install because it's trying to uninstall the desktop, which says, hey, package name, Pop Desktop. And Linus gets down to the bottom and says, yes, do as I say. I'm sorry, that's his fault. His desktop got wiped out. Even from a new user's perspective, you see something on the screen that says this is potentially harmful. Type the phrase, yes, do as I say. If you do that, that is on you, buddy. That is on you. You can't blame that on Linux. That is on you. And again, this is a bug. This is a weird bug. Pop! OS is not going to live this down. But I've never seen this. Other people are saying, yes, it has been a thing. Part of it's because I don't generally use Steam, but if I try to install a package and it's telling me that my desktop is going to be uninstalled, yes, do as I say. No, let's pass. And I've encountered a few bugs like that before, where it's like, we're going to uninstall something. No, don't do that. Let's evaluate this further. Let's look this up. Maybe you do a brief search on Steam trying to uninstall Pop Desktop. You know what? I really don't know. Let's just go ahead and do a search and see what happens when I do that. Pop, install Steam, uninstalls desktop. Let's see what we find. Desktop cluttered with Steam files, installation to Steam through apt causes you to uninstall a lot. This is apparently an issue with Steam. Linus Tech Tips fails in installing Steam on Pop OS. So there's a lot of stuff talking about this because of this. And let's see what this one is here. 2 days ago, patches apt for Pop OS to prevent users breaking their system. Huge amount of talk over switching to Linux for gaming thanks to a challenge from Linus Tech Tips where 2 people tried to full switch. Didn't go so well for Linus and Pop OS. System 76 is trying to improve. Pretty unfortunate that Linus was doing to install Steam. Pop's packaging had some sort of breakage and Linus ended up hosing Pop Desktop on install. Very interesting. And so apparently this was an issue or a bug they didn't know about until it became popularized, and so it should be patched by now. But these are the basic things you do. If your system says we're going to break something, if you continue, this is not Linux's fault. Okay, it's not. Because it's clear here he doesn't know exactly what he's doing. This is the time to call on the industry contact. This is the time to call the internal bug. Hey, internal nerd, I'm trying to install Steam and it says it will be removing Pop Desktop. Should I say yes, even though the system says? He'd probably say, let's look at this. And so, yes, Linus did indeed nuke his system because of this. This was an unfortunate issue with Pop OS, it would appear. That being said, that is a rare thing. Now, looking at the rest of the video here, let's go on and carry on a little bit here. So next we're going back over to Luke. Once again, the reason why I like Linux Mint. So he installs it, no big deal. He does a snapshot with time shift. Now he boots up the driver manager where he has options to install some NVIDIA drivers because that's something he does, which by the way, Pop OS has the same software as well. Now, if he had done the install with NVIDIA, it might have done this automatically already. But since I don't use NVIDIA, I don't know for sure. But regardless, he is showing us here that, yes, he's using the driver installer. It's giving him a few different options that would be compatible with his graphics card. And he does end up choosing the recommended one, and it goes well for him.
So we've got the Novu, or however that's pronounced, open source driver. Fantastic. Happy they made that. But we are going to try to move to the proprietary NVIDIA 470 driver. Install done. Just need to restart. A few more errors than last time, but I think we're still good. Genuinely think this is fine. Yeah. Nice.
Yeah, so he does not have any issues on his. So that's really the big breakaway. Most of the rest of the video is going to be Linus dumping Pop OS because his entire system has been nuked. Now, if he went back and reinstalled, especially since he's filming this, if he went back and reinstalled the packages that were uninstalled by Steam, he might have actually had his desktop back. But I don't know for sure. It's a fun theoretical. He should boot that thing back up and see if that would work. Luke has no problems, but Linus is like, all right, GNOME sucks. Let's go with Manjaro. And then he goes through and is able to install it. Oh, here's one issue I think that Luke had. And I have seen this little bug. You go to install something. Let's go ahead and let him explain it here.
Steam. Well, I selected install. It made me put in my password twice, and now it's removing. It never stopped trying to do that removing thing, but I just closed the package manager, clicked onto, I'm going to call start. I don't know if it's called start here, and Steam was sitting.
Yeah, I have seen this behavior. Now, I'm guessing he probably installed this as a flat pack. I didn't see that quite as clearly. The flat packs, I haven't had that issue with Linux Mint where it will go ahead and work on installing it, and then it installs, but it never updates the package manager to say it's done. And so if you close the package manager, you will find it perfectly working fine in the menu. I have seen that a few times, not every time, but a few times I have indeed seen that. So that is one of the issues that he had. And of course, Linus dumps that and he goes straight for Manjaro, which is going to have better support for NVIDIA than Mint is going to have. And then he's able to install Steam without bricking his entire desktop. And then it completes with him finally playing a game at the end of the video. So overall, it's neat to see them doing the challenge, and I will look forward to seeing the rest of these challenge videos. I'm going to go catch them. But overall, let's go ahead and do a couple brief breakdowns. Number one, never just jump ship like they did here. Bad plan. You start by looking at the applications you're using, see if there's a Linux version. If there's not, what other alternatives there are that you can use, and start switching to those. Adobe suites, you can use GIMP, you can use Inkscape. There's a variety of applications, but they're not Photoshop. Okay, guys, Photoshop is fine. But GIMP can do everything Photoshop can do, and it can do it just as easily. If you boot up GIMP and you've never used it and you've been using Photoshop for the last 20 years, obviously Photoshop is going to make a lot more sense to you. Now that I've been using GIMP as long as I've been using Photoshop, if I boot up Photoshop, I struggle with things in Photoshop that I can find in a hot second in GIMP, and they can do the same things. Okay, so you don't have to use those under many circumstances. Obviously, there's times where your company's forcing you to use Adobe because they've lost their ever-loving mind and love paying massive licensing fees to Adobe rather than using free software. But that's all on them. But for the average person out there, you don't need Photoshop. You need a image manipulation program. You don't need Office. You need an Office suite. And these are the things you do. So you can go to alternative, is it alternative2.net or is it alternative.to? I think they've changed the URL within the last 5 years or something, but you can find the alternative platforms. It's going to tell you what is out there and available. And there are many options like LibreOffice. You can install it on Windows, on Mac, and on Linux, no problem. GIMP, you can install on Windows and on Mac and on Linux, no problem. So you can start adding these FOSS applications to your workflow, and then when you figured out how to get your workflow going with those FOSS applications, jumping to Linux is completely seamless. The second takeaway from this is why focus exclusively on games, and why not watch a few YouTube videos prior to making your Linux decision rather than just rely on Tech Radar and Tom's Hardware Guide for just some top Linux distributions. There's a lot more resources out there than the industry insiders that many of us don't have access to and a simple Google search. There's a whole lot more options out there to research Linux, and it's a little bit of affronting to the rest of us who do put a lot of time into making Linux content for the general basic user when you're not even going to utilize that resource to make those decisions. Okay, and the next thing, of course, NVIDIA. If you're specifically building a system for Linux, don't use NVIDIA. It's going to give you headaches. GNOME did have an unfortunate problem. Well, we've learned about it bad. But Linus bears just as much responsibility because he clearly did not know what he's doing. By his own admission at the beginning of the video, he did not know what he's doing. And he still types, yes, do as I say, and it bricked his system. That's not on Linux. That's on you. Because it even told you at the very top, pop desktop. What'd you think was going to get uninstalled? Candy Crush? I mean, really. So yes, he did nuke it, but he also just, didn't lose much time. He just spun up Manjaro and everything's working at the end of the video. So did he really have a bad experience? very interesting thoughts. So that's kind of my takeaway from this video. It's definitely excellent. If you've not seen the Linus Tech Tips video, go ahead and have a look at it down there, and certainly follow along with them. As I said at the beginning, I just don't watch their channel a lot because it's just too much promotion, and not enough real honest critique. But they still are excellent guys at what they do, and they do a good job over there. So there's my thoughts. There's my overall takeaway. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. Thank you for watching this video from Switched to Linux. This channel would not be possible without the backing of the program supporters scrolling on the screen now. You can be a supporter at Patreon at patreon.com/TOMM or at thinklifemedia.com. I also want to thank the open source community who creates such excellent software that makes producing this show possible. Please remember to support your software communities. Thank you, and I hope that you enjoy switching to Linux.